The stranger in the storm. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the cabin's wooden walls. Ethan sat by the fire, staring at the flames as they danced in the dark room. Outside, the storm raged like a wild animal, the kind he had grown used to living in the mountains. It had been years since he left the chaos of the world behind, retreating to this quiet, solitary life. But tonight, the quiet was shattered. A loud knock echoed through the cabin, startling Ethan. He froze, listening. It came again, frantic, urgent. Who could be out here in this weather? He muttered, grabbing the shotgun leaning against the wall. Ethan approached the door cautiously, peering through the small window. At first he saw nothing but the swirling snow and darkness. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, drenched and shivering, her hands pressed against the door. He hesitated. Something about her seemed off. Her eyes glowed faintly, almost like they reflected the firelight from inside. Her skin, pale and smooth, shimmered under the heavy rain. "Help, please," she said, her voice weak and trembling. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to keep the door closed. He had lived long enough to know when something wasn't right. But another look at her desperate face made him sigh. He unlocked the door and pulled it open just enough to speak. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "There's nothing for miles." "Danger. They're coming," she stammered, looking over her shoulder into the forest. Her accent was strange, her words broken as if she was still learning the language. "Please, let me in." Ethan scanned the woods, but all he saw was snow whipping through the air. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. "Who's coming?" he pressed, gripping the shotgun tighter. "No time," she whispered, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "Please." Against his better judgment, Ethan stepped aside and let her in. She stumbled past him, collapsing onto the wooden floor. Her clothes were torn, and blood seeped from a gash on her arm. But when he knelt to check the wound, the blood wasn't red. It was a silvery, almost metallic color. "What the hell?" he muttered, his stomach twisting. The woman grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail-looking. "Hide me," she begged. "They will kill us both." Ethan's mind raced. Was she some kind of experiment? A fugitive? The questions piled up, but before he could ask, a strange noise filled the air, a low, mechanical hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The woman's eyes widened in terror. "They're here." Ethan stood, his military instincts kicking in. He bolted the door and checked the windows, but the sound grew louder, vibrating through the walls. He could feel it in his chest, like the heartbeat of some monstrous machine. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, turning to her. She struggled to her feet, pointing to the fireplace. "Hide. Now." Ethan didn't move. He wasn't about to let some stranger, glowing eyes or not, dictate his next move. But then the cabin was bathed in an eerie blue light. It came from outside, shining through the cracks in the walls and doorframe. Ethan peeked out the window and saw a craft hovering above the trees. It wasn't like any helicopter or plane he had ever seen. Sleek and silent, it pulsed with the same blue light, scanning the ground below. "What are they?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The woman grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "Hunters. They'll take me. And kill you." The craft descended, and the humming turned into a high-pitched whine. Ethan could see figures moving in the shadows, tall, slender shapes with glowing eyes like hers, but colder, crueler. He turned to the woman. "If they're hunting you, why come here? Why bring them to me?" Tears welled in her glowing eyes. "I had no choice." Ethan didn't have time to argue. He grabbed his shotgun and motioned for her to follow him. "There's a trapdoor under the rug. Go." She hesitated, but the desperation in his voice pushed her to move. She stumbled toward the trapdoor, and Ethan yanked the rug aside, revealing a small cellar. She climbed down just as the front door rattled. Ethan slammed the trapdoor shut and covered it with the rug. He stood, shotgun in hand, as the door splintered under the force of whatever was outside. The last thought that crossed his mind before the door burst open was one he hadn't had in years. I might not survive this. Hunted. The cabin door exploded inward with a deafening crash, sending wooden shards flying across the room. Ethan didn't flinch. Years of combat training had taught him to stay calm in chaos. He gripped the shotgun tightly, aiming toward the doorway. But what stepped inside was unlike anything he had ever seen. The creature was tall, its frame unnaturally slender and wrapped in a metallic armor that glowed faintly in the dim firelight. Its face was concealed behind a smooth, featureless helmet that emitted a pulsating blue light. In its hands, it carried a strange weapon, sleek, alien, and humming with energy. Ethan fired without hesitation. The shotgun blast echoed through the cabin, the force of it slamming into the creature's chest. But instead of dropping, the alien stumbled back only slightly, as if Ethan had hit it with a weak punch. Sparks erupted from its armor, and a high-pitched screech came from its helmet, a sound that chilled Ethan to his core. The alien raised its weapon, but Ethan dove behind the overturned table just as a beam of blue light shot across the room. It struck the wall, disintegrating the wooden planks in an instant. The storm outside howled louder through the gaping hole. "Great," Ethan muttered under his breath. "Armor-plated aliens with laser guns. Just my luck." From the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Another figure appeared in the doorway, identical to the first. Two of them now. Their mechanical movements were precise, calculating, as they scanned the room. One of them emitted a strange clicking sound, like a language Ethan couldn't understand. Ethan reloaded quickly, his mind racing. He needed a plan. The trapdoor was hidden for now, but if these things tore apart the cabin, they'd find the woman. And judging by the look in her eyes earlier, she wasn't exaggerating about what they'd do to both of them. His gaze darted to the fireplace. The embers still glowed hot, and beside it was the iron poker he used to stoke the flames. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The first alien stepped closer, scanning the room with its glowing helmet. Ethan grabbed the poker and hurled it into the fire. Sparks erupted, momentarily blinding the creature. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan sprang from his cover and fired another round. This time, he aimed for the head. The helmet cracked under the force, and the alien staggered, letting out another piercing screech. Its weapon fired wildly, sending beams of energy through the ceiling. The second alien turned its attention to Ethan, but before it could react, Ethan grabbed the damaged creature by its arm and used it as a shield. The second alien hesitated, its weapon raised but unwilling to fire at its companion. Ethan used the moment to his advantage, shoving the injured alien toward its ally. The two collided, and for a brief second, Ethan thought he might have the upper hand. That was until the third one stepped into the cabin. This one was larger than the others, its armor darker and lined with jagged, glowing patterns. It carried a weapon twice the size of the others, and its presence filled the room with an almost oppressive energy. Ethan could feel it, like static electricity crawling over his skin. "Seriously," Ethan growled. "How many of you are there?" The third alien didn't hesitate. It raised its weapon and fired a blast that destroyed the table Ethan had been hiding behind. He dove to the side, rolling to avoid the debris, and scrambled toward the fireplace. His hand closed around the iron poker he'd thrown earlier, now red-hot from the flames. The large alien advanced, its weapon charging for another shot. Ethan waited, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. As the alien stepped closer, he lunged forward, driving the red-hot poker into the gap between its armor plates. The creature let out a guttural roar, dropping its weapon and thrashing violently. Ethan didn't stick around to see if it would recover. He grabbed the alien's fallen weapon, a sleek, glowing rifle-like device, and ducked behind the remains of the doorframe. The weapon felt lighter than it looked, and its surface was smooth and warm, almost alive. He didn't know how to use it, but he figured pulling the trigger was a good place to start. The two remaining aliens turned toward him, their helmets glowing brighter as they locked onto their target. Ethan aimed the alien weapon and squeezed the trigger. The burst of blue energy shot out, hitting one of them square in the chest. This time, the creature went down, its armor sparking violently as it collapsed. "Not bad," Ethan muttered, a small grin creeping onto his face. But the grin vanished as the larger alien, still smoking from the poker wound, lunged at him with surprising speed. It knocked the weapon from his hands and pinned him against the wall, its glowing helmet inches from his face. Ethan struggled, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. From beneath the floorboards, a soft hum began to rise. The alien froze, its helmet turning toward the source of the sound. A second later, the trapdoor flew open, and the woman emerged, her hands glowing with a brilliant white light. "Get down," she shouted, her voice commanding and clear. Ethan dropped to the floor just as a blinding burst of energy shot from her hands, engulfing the alien in light. When the glow faded, the creature was gone. Nothing but ash and smoke remained. Breathing heavily, Ethan stared at her, his mind racing to process what he'd just seen. "What the hell are you?" he asked. She looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with a mix of fear and resolve. "Your only chance," she said. "Now we run." The chase. Ethan barely had time to grab his coat before the woman pulled him toward the shattered doorway. The storm outside was still raging, snow swirling in the freezing wind, but it wasn't enough to hide the eerie blue light glowing in the distance. More of the aliens were coming. "Wait," Ethan shouted over the storm. "We can't just run out into this mess. Where are we even going?" "No time," the woman snapped, her accent thick, but her urgency unmistakable. "If we stay, they will find us." Ethan gritted his teeth. He hated being dragged into situations he didn't understand, but staying put wasn't an option. He grabbed the alien weapon he'd taken earlier and followed her into the storm. The cold hit him like a wall, but the adrenaline pumping through his veins kept him moving. The woman moved quickly, darting through the trees with surprising agility. Ethan struggled to keep up, his boots crunching through the deep snow. "Who are they?" he demanded, his breath visible in the freezing air. "What do they want?" She glanced back at him, her glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. "Hunters. They come for me." "And why's that?" Ethan pressed, trying to make sense of the chaos. "What did you do?" She hesitated, her expression conflicted. "I ran. I disobeyed." Ethan opened his mouth to ask more, but a sudden hum in the air stopped him cold. The sound was faint at first, like the vibration of a distant engine, but it grew louder with every passing second. "They're close," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "Hide." Ethan scanned their surroundings. The forest was dense, but there was no solid cover, just snow-covered trees and rocks. He spotted a cluster of boulders a few yards ahead and motioned toward them. "Over there." They dove behind the rocks just as the blue light swept through the trees. Ethan pressed himself against the cold stone, gripping the alien weapon tightly. The light moved like a search beam, scanning the forest floor in slow, deliberate passes. The woman crouched beside him, her glowing skin dimming slightly as if she were trying to hide her presence. She clutched her side, and Ethan noticed for the first time that her wound had reopened, the silvery blood staining her clothing. "You're hurt," he whispered. "I'll survive," she replied, her voice tense. "Quiet now." The humming grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of footsteps in the snow. Ethan peeked around the edge of the boulder and saw 3 figures moving through the trees. Their armor glowed faintly in the darkness, the same cold blue light that had filled his cabin. They moved methodically, scanning the ground and the surrounding trees with devices that looked like handheld scanners. One of them stopped, tilting its helmeted head as if it had heard something. It turned slowly, its scanner sweeping dangerously close to their hiding spot. Ethan's grip on the weapon tightened. His military instincts screamed at him to stay hidden. But if they were discovered, They wouldn't stand a chance without fighting back. The alien stepped closer, the beam of its scanner illuminating the snow just a few feet away. Ethan held his breath, his finger hovering over the trigger. The woman reached out, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if to stop him. Then, a sound erupted in the distance, a high-pitched screech, followed by the crash of falling trees. The aliens froze, their scanners snapping toward the source of the noise. Without a word, they moved in unison, heading toward the disturbance. Ethan exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the freezing air. What was that? Decoy, the woman said, standing shakily. It will not fool them for long. We must keep moving. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You can do that. Make sounds like that. She didn't answer, already moving deeper into the forest. Ethan followed, questions piling up in his mind. Whoever, or whatever, this woman was, she wasn't just running from these creatures. She was hiding something much bigger. After what felt like hours, they came to a steep ridge overlooking a narrow valley. The storm had eased slightly, but the wind still bit at Ethan's face as he looked down at the dark expanse below. There, she said, pointing to a cluster of rocks at the base of the valley. Safe for now. Ethan frowned. How do you know that? Trust me, she said, her tone firm. Ethan wanted to argue, but the hum of the hunter's scanners echoed faintly behind them, cutting off any debate. They slid down the ridge, the snow cushioning their descent, and made their way toward the rocks. As they reached the base of the valley, the woman collapsed against one of the boulders, clutching her side. Her breathing was labored, and the glow in her eyes flickered. You're not fine, Ethan said, kneeling beside her. You're bleeding out. She shook her head weakly. It's not like you. Different. Slower. Well, slower isn't good enough, Ethan muttered. He shrugged off his coat and ripped a strip from his shirt, wrapping it tightly around her wound. This'll have to do for now. She looked at him, her expression softening. You help me, even though you don't know me. Ethan sighed, leaning back against the rock. Yeah, well, I've got a bad habit of sticking my neck out for trouble. Before she could respond, a new sound filled the air, a low, rhythmic pounding, like the heartbeat of something massive. Ethan looked up and saw a bright light descending from the sky, its glow casting eerie shadows over the valley. The woman's eyes widened in fear. They'd found us. Ethan stood, raising the alien weapon. Then we make our stand. The truth revealed. The rhythmic pounding grew louder, shaking the ground beneath Ethan's feet. Snow cascaded from the rocks above as a massive alien craft descended into the valley. Its sleek, dark surface gleamed, covered in the same glowing patterns as the hunter's armor. Ethan could feel the hum of its engines vibrating in his chest, like an ominous warning. Is this their ship? Ethan asked, gripping the alien weapon tightly. The woman nodded weakly, leaning against the rock for support. It's a transport. They'll deploy more hunters. Ethan cursed under his breath. Great. You've got a plan, right? Because I'm running out of ideas. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes dim but resolute. There's a cave nearby. Hidden. They won't find us there. Ethan glanced at the approaching craft, then back at her. Fine. Lead the way. She tried to push herself up, but her legs gave out beneath her. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground. You're not going anywhere on your own, he said, lifting her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. She didn't argue, which told Ethan just how bad her condition was. He moved quickly, navigating the uneven terrain as the ship's searchlights began sweeping the valley. The beams of light cut through the darkness, scanning every inch of the ground. Ethan ducked behind a boulder just as one passed overhead. We won't make it, the woman murmured, her voice barely audible over the sound of the engines. We'll make it, Ethan said firmly. Just tell me where to go. She raised a trembling hand, pointing toward a cluster of rocks on the far side of the valley. There, behind the largest one, you'll see an opening. Ethan nodded and adjusted his grip on her. He waited for the next searchlight to pass, then sprinted across the snow-covered ground. His boots crunched loudly in the silence, but the storm was starting to pick up again, its howling winds masking their movement. The ground beneath him began to vibrate as the ship landed. Ethan glanced back and saw the ramp lowering. More hunters emerged, their glowing armor cutting through the storm like beacons. They fanned out, their scanners humming as they began their search. Almost there, Ethan muttered, more to himself than to her. His breath came in short bursts, the cold air burning his lungs. He reached the large rock she pointed to and saw the opening, a narrow crevice barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. "This better not be a dead end," he said, shifting her weight to one arm as he maneuvered into the cave. The crevice opened into a small chamber, the walls glistening with frost. Ethan gently set her down against the wall and turned to block the entrance with a few loose rocks. It wouldn't hold the hunters for long, but it might buy them a few extra seconds if they were discovered. "Safe, for now," she whispered, her head resting against the wall. Ethan crouched beside her, his pulse still racing. "Okay, now you're going to tell me what's going on. Who are you? What are those things? And why the hell are they after you?" She looked at him, her glowing eyes flickering like dying embers. For a moment, Ethan thought she might pass out, but then she spoke, her voice steadier than before. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I come from a world far from here. Those hunters, they're bounty enforcers from my planet." Ethan frowned. "Bounty hunters? What did you do to piss them off?" Lyra hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I disobeyed my leaders. I stole something from them. Something they don't want your kind to have." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "My kind? You mean humans?" She nodded. "They plan to invade your world. I was sent here to prepare the way. But when I saw what they intended, I couldn't let it happen." Ethan leaned back, trying to process her words. "So, let me get this straight. Your people sent you here to help them take over Earth, but you changed your mind and decided to stop them." "Yes," she said. "And now they're hunting me because I know too much." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Why Earth? What do they want from us?" Lyra's gaze dropped to the ground. "Your resources. Your planet is rich in materials they need. But more than that, they fear you." Ethan blinked. "Fear us? Why?" "Because you're unpredictable," she said, her voice tinged with something like admiration. "Your species is young, but you adapt quickly. You create, destroy, and rebuild faster than they can comprehend. They see you as a threat to their dominance." Ethan let out a dry laugh. "Great, so we're not just a target, we're a problem." "Yes," Lyra said. "And if they succeed, they won't just conquer you. They'll destroy everything that makes your species unique." Ethan was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Finally, he stood and checked the weapon he'd taken from the hunter. "If what you're saying is true, then we've got bigger problems than just staying alive. We need to warn someone." Lyra shook her head. "There's no time. The invasion fleet is already on its way." Ethan stared at her, his mind spinning. "Then we stop them." Lyra looked at him, a faint smile on her lips despite her exhaustion. "You're brave, human, but even you can't fight an entire fleet." "Maybe not," Ethan said, a spark of determination in his eyes. "But I've spent my whole life fighting against impossible odds, and I'm not about to stop now." Before Lyra could respond, a loud rumble echoed through the cave. The hunters had found the entrance. Ethan raised the weapon, his jaw set. "Stay behind me. If they want you, they're going to have to go through me first." Survival Alliance. The rumble at the cave entrance grew louder, followed by the distinct sound of something heavy scraping against stone. Ethan tightened his grip on the alien weapon, his heart pounding like a drum. He glanced back at Lyra, slumped against the wall, her glowing eyes half closed. "You better have some kind of miracle up your sleeve," Ethan muttered, keeping his voice low. Because I don't think this pea shooter's going to cut it. Lyra weakly raised her hand, a faint glow forming in her palm. The weapon. It's more than you think. If they come close, aim for the core. Ethan frowned. The core? What core? She pointed toward her chest, mimicking a spot near her heart. Their armor hides it. But if you hit there, it's fatal. Great, Ethan muttered. Hit the glowing weak spot. Real original. The scraping stopped, replaced by a deep silence that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. Then came a loud crash, and the entrance to the cave lit up with the blue glow of the hunter's scanners. Ethan raised the weapon, stepping in front of Lyra. The first hunter ducked into the chamber, its helmet casting light across the walls. It paused, scanning the room with its featureless visor. Behind it, 2 more hunters followed, their movements precise and mechanical. Ethan didn't wait for them to act. He squeezed the trigger, sending a burst of energy straight into the lead hunter. The beam struck its chest, but the armor absorbed most of the impact, only staggering it slightly. "Damn it," Ethan hissed. He adjusted his aim, remembering Lyra's advice. The second shot hit higher, near the hunter's chest plate. Sparks flew as the beam struck something critical. The hunter emitted a metallic screech, collapsing to the ground in a twitching heap. "That's one," Ethan muttered, but the other 2 hunters didn't give him time to celebrate. One of them raised its weapon, firing a blue beam that narrowly missed Ethan's head and melted a chunk of the cave wall. He dove behind a boulder, the alien weapon humming as it recharged. The second hunter advanced, its steps heavy and deliberate. Ethan popped out of cover, firing again. This time, the beam hit its mark, striking the hunter's core. It crumpled instantly, its armor smoking. The last hunter moved faster, its weapon firing in quick bursts that forced Ethan to retreat. His back hit the wall, and he realized he was cornered. "Lyra," he called, panic creeping into his voice. Any help would be great right about now. Lyra's glow brightened, and she raised her hand weakly. A sphere of white light formed in her palm, crackling with energy. She threw it toward the remaining hunter, and it exploded on impact, engulfing the alien in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the hunter was gone. Only ash and scorched metal remained. Ethan blinked, his ears ringing. "Okay, I take it back. That was impressive." Lyra slumped further against the wall, her glow dimming. "Not much left," she murmured. "Energy fading." Ethan knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, stay with me. We're not done yet." She shook her head weakly. "More will come. The ship, it's calling reinforcements." Ethan cursed under his breath. "Then we stop the ship." Lyra's eyes widened. You can't. Too many." Ethan stood, determination etched into his face. "I didn't survive 2 tours in the worst war zones on Earth just to get outsmarted by a bunch of space robots. Show me where to hit them, and I'll take care of the rest." Lyra hesitated, then raised a trembling hand. "The ship's core is in the rear. A vent leads to it, but heavily guarded." "Figures," Ethan said, gripping the alien weapon. He glanced at Lyra. "Stay here. I'll handle it." Her hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "No, you won't survive." "Neither will you if we sit here waiting for them to come back," Ethan replied. "Just trust me, all right? I've done this kind of thing before." Her grip loosened, and she nodded reluctantly. "Be careful, human." Ethan smirked. "Name's Ethan. If I don't make it, try to remember that." With that, he turned and slipped out of the cave, the freezing wind hitting him like a slap. The alien ship loomed in the distance, its blue lights cutting through the storm. Ethan moved quickly, keeping low as he approached the craft. The hunters were spread out, their scanners sweeping the ground in overlapping patterns. Ethan's military training kicked in, his movements precise and deliberate. He avoided the lights, sticking to the shadows. When a lone hunter passed too close, He disabled it with a quick, well-placed shot to the core. As he neared the ship, he spotted the vent Lyra had described. It was small, barely big enough for him to crawl through, and guarded by 2 hunters. Ethan gritted his teeth. This wasn't going to be easy. He picked up a rock and hurled it into the snow a few yards away. The sound drew the hunters' attention, their scanners sweeping toward the noise. As they moved to investigate, Ethan sprinted to the vent, sliding inside just as one of them turned back. Inside, the vent was dark and narrow, the metallic walls cold against his hands. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder as he crawled forward, each movement bringing him closer to the core. Finally, he reached the end of the vent. Through the grate, he saw the core, a massive glowing sphere pulsating with blue energy. It was surrounded by cables and machinery, with 2 more hunters standing guard. Ethan took a deep breath, gripping the alien weapon. Here goes nothing. He kicked the grate open and dropped into the chamber, firing before his feet even hit the ground. The call to action. Ethan hit the ground hard, rolling into a crouch as his first shot connected with one of the hunters. The beam pierced its core, and the alien crumpled to the floor in a sparking heap. The second hunter spun toward him, its weapon charging with a high-pitched whine. Ethan dove behind a console just as the hunter fired, the beam scorching the wall where he'd been standing. The ship's core loomed in the center of the chamber, a massive sphere of pulsating blue energy surrounded by intricate, glowing machinery. The air hummed with power, and the heat from the core made sweat bead on Ethan's forehead, despite the freezing storm outside. The second hunter advanced, its heavy footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. Ethan popped up from behind the console, firing another shot. The beam hit the hunter's shoulder, staggering it but not doing enough damage. It raised its weapon, and Ethan ducked as another beam sizzled past him. "Damn it," he muttered, glancing around the room for options. His eyes landed on a bundle of thick cables snaking from the core to the walls. If the cables were anything like power lines, severing them might disable the core, or at least cause enough chaos to buy him time. Ethan pulled out the alien blade he'd taken from one of the fallen hunters earlier. It was a strange, lightweight weapon that emitted a faint, shimmering edge. He didn't understand its technology, but he didn't need to. All he needed was for it to cut. The hunter fired again, forcing Ethan to stay low as he crawled toward the cables. When he reached them, he swung the blade with all his strength. The edge sliced cleanly through the first cable, and the room was immediately flooded with a shower of sparks. The core's glow flickered, and the hum in the air grew louder, more erratic. The hunter froze for a moment, its helmet turning toward the core as if assessing the situation. Ethan didn't give it a chance to recover. He aimed the alien weapon at its chest and fired. The beam struck true, hitting the core beneath its armor. The hunter let out a distorted screech before collapsing in a heap. Ethan didn't stop to celebrate. He turned back to the remaining cables and began cutting them one by one. With each severed connection, the core grew more unstable. The sphere of energy pulsed violently, its glow shifting from blue to a dangerous red. A sudden rumble shook the ship, and the lights in the chamber began to flicker. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, his heart racing. He had no idea how much time he had before the core went critical, but he knew he didn't want to be there when it happened. Grabbing the alien weapon, he sprinted back toward the vent. As he climbed inside, an alarm blared, its high-pitched wail echoing through the ship. The core's pulsing grew faster, and the heat in the chamber became unbearable. Ethan crawled through the vent as fast as he could, the vibrations of the ship making it harder to move. When he finally emerged outside, the storm hit him like a slap, the freezing wind a sharp contrast to the sweltering heat inside the ship. He didn't stop to catch his breath. He sprinted back toward the cave, glancing over his shoulder just in time to see the ship's core explode in a brilliant flash of red light. The shockwave rippled through the valley, sending snow and debris flying. Ethan dove behind a boulder, shielding himself as the blast roared past him. When the dust settled, Ethan stood, his ears ringing. The alien ship was gone, replaced by a smoking crater. The hunters that had been searching the valley were either destroyed or retreating, their glowing forms disappearing into the storm. Ethan stumbled back to the cave, his legs trembling from exhaustion. Inside, he found Lyra still slumped against the wall, her glow faint but steady. "It's done," he said, dropping the alien weapon and collapsing beside her. "Your ship's toast. No more reinforcements." Lyra's eyes flickered open, a faint smile crossing her lips. "You did it." Ethan nodded, leaning back against the wall. "Yeah, but I'm guessing this isn't over." She shook her head slowly. "The invasion fleet is still coming." Ethan groaned. "Of course it is, because why would anything be simple?" Lyra's expression turned serious. "There's one chance. The device I carry, it can send a signal, a warning to my allies. But it's damaged." Ethan sat up, his eyes narrowing. "Can it be fixed?" She hesitated, then nodded. "If we have the right tools." Ethan pushed himself to his feet, determination burning in his eyes. "Then we find them. If we can warn someone, anyone, we might stand a chance." Lyra reached out, her hand gripping his arm. "You've done so much." "Why?" Ethan looked down at her, his jaw set. "Because if there's one thing humans are good at, it's fighting back. Humanity's stand." Ethan wasted no time. He helped Lyra to her feet, her weight heavy on his shoulder. Outside, the storm had started to clear, the pale glow of dawn creeping over the mountains. The valley was eerily quiet now, the remnants of the alien ship's destruction scattered across the snow. "You said the device can send a signal," Ethan said as they trudged through the snow. "What exactly are we looking for to fix it?" Lyra reached into the folds of her tattered clothing and pulled out a small palm-sized device. Its surface shimmered faintly, alien glyphs glowing weakly on its surface. "A power source," she said. "This one is nearly depleted. Without energy, it can't send the signal." Ethan examined the device, his brow furrowing. "A power source, like a battery." Lyra nodded. "But not like yours. It must be strong. Something to handle the signal's frequency." Ethan glanced toward the horizon, his military instincts kicking in. "There's a communications tower about 20 miles from here. It's abandoned, but it might have something we can use." Lyra's glowing eyes brightened slightly with hope. "If it's powerful enough, it could work." "Then let's move," Ethan said, shifting her weight to help her walk faster. "We're burning daylight." The journey to the communications tower was grueling. Lyra's condition worsened as the hours passed, her glow flickering like a dying flame. Ethan pushed through the snow, his military training carrying him forward despite his own exhaustion. When they finally reached the tower, it loomed over them like a skeletal giant, its rusted frame creaking in the wind. Ethan scanned the area for any signs of movement but saw nothing. "Looks clear," he said. "Stay close." Inside the control room, Ethan found what he was looking for, a power terminal, its lights dim but still active. He set Lyra down on a bench and began examining the equipment. "This should work," he said, pulling cables free. "It's not pretty, but it's got enough juice to light up half the mountain." Lyra handed him the device, her hands trembling. "Connect it here," she said, pointing to a port on its side. "But be careful. The energy surge will." Before she could finish, a loud hum filled the air. Ethan froze, his heart sinking. "They're here." Through the cracked window, he saw them. More hunters, their glowing armor cutting through the snow. But these were different. They moved faster, their forms sleeker, more advanced. "They won't stop," Lyra whispered, her voice weak. "They'll destroy everything to keep the signal from going out." Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the alien weapon he'd taken from the ship. "Then we don't let them." He connected the device to the power terminal, and it hummed to life, its glyphs glowing brighter. Lyra winced as the energy coursed through it, but she nodded. "It's working. Keep them away." Until it's done. Ethan nodded and moved to the doorway, weapon raised. The first hunter appeared, its weapon charging as it sprinted toward the tower. Ethan fired, his shot striking its core and sending it sprawling into the snow. Two more followed, their movements erratic and hard to predict. Ethan ducked as a beam of energy sizzled past his head. "This is getting old," he muttered, firing again. One of the hunters went down, but the other leaped onto the tower, scaling the rusted frame with terrifying speed. "Lyra," Ethan shouted, backing toward her. "How much longer?" 2 minutes, she said, her voice strained. The device glowed brighter, its hum rising to a piercing whine. Ethan turned back to see the hunter smashing through the window, its glowing eyes locked onto Lyra. Without thinking, he tackled the alien, slamming it into the wall. The impact knocked its weapon free, but its strength was overwhelming. It threw Ethan aside like a rag doll, advancing on Lyra. "No," Ethan roared, grabbing a steel pipe from the floor. He swung it with all his strength, striking the hunter in the head. The blow cracked its helmet, but it barely slowed. Desperate, Ethan jabbed the pipe into its core, using all his weight to force it in. The hunter screeched, its movements jerky as sparks flew from its chest. Ethan shoved it out the broken window, watching as it fell to the ground below, shattering on impact. "Ethan," Lyra called, her voice urgent. "It's ready." He turned to see the device glowing brighter than ever, its glyphs flashing in rapid patterns. "What now?" Lyra held it out to him, pointed at the sky, and activated. "It will send the signal." Ethan grabbed the device and climbed onto the roof of the tower. The storm had cleared, the sky a brilliant expanse of blue. He aimed the device upward, pressing the glowing glyph at its center. A beam of white light shot into the sky, piercing through the clouds. The energy was so intense that Ethan could feel the heat radiating from it. He watched as the light grew brighter, spreading across the horizon like a second sun. Below, the remaining hunters froze, their movements erratic. One by one, they collapsed, their systems overloaded by the signal. Ethan climbed back down, his legs trembling. Lyra looked up at him, her glow steady now. "The message. It's sent. My allies will come." Ethan sat beside her, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "And the invasion fleet. They'll think twice now," Lyra said, a faint smile on her lips. "Earth is not alone." Ethan leaned back against the wall, staring at the horizon. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. "Guess humanity's got some fight left in it," he said with a grin. The end.